Hey guys, and welcome back to the Yes It Means Yes podcast. On this week's episode, we have Courtney Batt here. Courtney is a survivor, and she is here to tell us about her experience and kind of like what has occurred since, what she wants people to know, and we're just going to kind of go in and talk with her about questions. So we actually ended up developing the questions with Courtney just to make sure that we were both like on the same page and comfortable and good with what making sure we got the right message out that Courtney wanted to get out. So these questions were okayed and developed by her. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to let Aileen and Courtney introduce themselves. But as usual, my name is Faith Nomshev. I am a victim advocate and outreach coordinator with Rape Counselors of East Alabama.
Hi, I'm Aileen Nelson. I'm the Prevention Education Coordinator with Rape Counselors of East Alabama.
I'm Courtney Batt, and I'm a survivor, and I'm here to tell you about my story.
So to start off, we're just going to jump right into the questions that we had gone through. What would you like to share, if anything, about your experience?
Gosh, there's a lot. I think that for me, like my journey has been really, really hard. I know right after it happened, I was completely overwhelmed with emotion. I didn't want to tell anyone. I buried and suppressed all of those emotions, put them in a box and put them so far back in a corner that not even I was really able to find them. So having to go through therapy and pull out those boxes and try to start unpacking things has definitely been a really hard and trying experience. The road has definitely been long, like I'm over a year out, and sometimes I feel like I just started. But then there are other days that I can see a lot of progress.
So you talked about your progress. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your recovery process since the assault?
Yeah. So right now, my recovery process is still ongoing. Again, it's been really difficult. There's been a lot of obstacles that I've had to face, and I'm sure that there are going to be plenty more that are going to come into my path. I think so. I've been knocked down a whole lot, and then I've gotten back up, and then it's like you just get knocked all the way back down, all the way into an abyss, and then you're like, oh, where did my rope go to get back up? And you're searching and searching. But then you find this little light, and you're like, oh, instead of a rope, there's stairs for me to start climbing up. But you didn't really see those before until I started to unpack those emotions and actually not avoid them and confront them. I think therapy has been the hardest part for me. Some people think it's just super easy. You know, you go in, you lay on this couch, and like the Hollywood movies, they say, so how do you feel about that? And you're like, oh, I feel terrible. And then you're cured or something. That's not at all how it works. It's actually a lot more difficult than that. So I'm not going to lie and say it's easy because it's not. And I struggled for a long time to see my process and the progress that I made. And I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere for a long time. And sometimes I still feel that way. But just yesterday, I had probably one of the best sessions in therapy that I've ever had. We tried something a little bit different, and some of these walls that I had built up, I was able to somehow get to the top of one and look over to the other side and realize that everything that I had felt was real, and it was there, and it was valid. And so I think that kind of like really hit home for me. And so then I got to look back at some of the journals that I had written probably like a month or two after it happened, and then look at the journals that I've written now. And I've been able to see like that there's a huge difference in what I've written between the negative thoughts versus the coping mechanisms that I've been able to use to bring me back to a peaceful state.
Good. We're glad to hear that. I know it's always nice when you have like that therapy session. It's like, oh, light bulb. Like, yes, I got it.
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely.
Okay. But then even with that being said, when you get that light bulb, I think what a lot of people don't know that it's good that you said is that it's not like always a straight path to recovery. Like that once you start feeling better, there can still be ups and downs in your road, knowing that like, it's only temporary. You're not going to feel down forever. Those ups and downs are like all a part of life.
Yeah, for sure. And for me too, I have a really good friend at church. When I moved back, like I reached out to her, and there was a Sunday in particular that I was really feeling like I needed to let a lot of stuff go. And so I wrote down some of those things on paper, and I, tore them up, and then I laid them down at the altar, and we prayed over them. And I was like, okay, I'm going to let all these go. And for a long time, I was like, wow, like I feel amazing. But then those triggers happen, and it's almost like you were like, just kidding, I changed my mind. And you go back and start picking up all those pieces. And so then you have to try and work back to get yourself to lay them all down again. It's not easy, and it's definitely, like you said, it's very much an up and down roller coaster.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is recovery is not linear, because that is just so accurate.
Sure.
Like with something as traumatic as like an assault, for sure. So I know you talked a little bit about church. Has the assault made it difficult to perform like your typical like day-to-day duties at school, at work, at home? Has it affected those in any ways?
Yeah, so I think like loud noises used to really bother me. If people would come up behind me, like, and I didn't hear them, and they would like tap me on the shoulder or something, like I get startled really easy. I could see someone at work or just like out and about throughout my day, or even if it was like a professor that happened to have similar like facial structure, I would get triggered and have like panic attacks. And I didn't sleep well for a very long time. I think there was like a period of like a month or two where I may have gotten like 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night, because I would have like the flashbacks. And when all that happens, it makes it really hard for you to put any emotional, mental effort into work or school or relationships in general.
So what are some things you wish people knew about healing from sexual assault?
That it's really, really, really hard. Healing is not a one size fits all. You could have 10 or 20 people that get sexually assaulted, and they may experience the same things. They may not. One treatment may work for one where it doesn't work for anyone else. Their coping mechanisms may be different. So their entire journey is not going to be the same as someone else's. Like you said, it's not linear at all. And survivors, like we don't enjoy feeling the way that we do. It's hard. Like we want to be able to be fine. And I say quotations because there's a lot of times like we're like, oh, we're fine, when we're not. But we want to portray this image that we are, because we don't want to seem like we have been affected. And so again, like for survivors, it's really hard because we don't want to have to communicate anything. And what I found is it's almost like a pride issue, without calling it that, because we want to be able to manage things on our own when we can't. But it's also really hard for the family too, because the family and friends, like they don't know exactly like what is going on in our minds. So unless we tell them, they're not really going to know. And even if they really want to be there, for us, it is hard for them because sometimes they don't know what to say or how to act or really the full extent of what happened or what is happening to us or in that situation. And so I think that that's where like communication and awareness and education is plays a big part.
Yeah, definitely. So you were talking about, how other survivors, not everyone's path is different. Have you gotten support from other survivors, or have you had good social support from your friends, your family?
Yeah, so I have really good support from my parents and my sister. They're awesome, and I have a few friends that do know what happened, and so they're very encouraging. Saying that they're gonna, pray for me and like that they're there for me. Like if I want to talk and stuff like that. My church has been really beneficial. Like my pastors are amazing. All of the medical and healthcare professionals that I've came into contact with that have helped lead me in the right direction, like they've also been a great support.
Good. That's a huge, huge step. From just our experiences with other survivors, that can really play like a huge impact in their healing process. One thing that we always want to encourage people is like when you make like that first disclosure, whether it's to family, friend, whoever it is, it's so important that they're believed immediately because that really does set a precedent. So having that support is so huge. And I'm so glad that you have, I know your family, so I can say you have a great family for sure.
Oh yeah, they're pretty great.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you do have that support system because, I mean, sadly, so many people don't.
Yeah, that's true. They don't, and I think like resources and like other support systems, like even in some people's area, is not really advertised as it should. And so when people don't see that, they don't really know what to do. And so then they kind of just like get stuck in this muck and don't really know how to get out of it.
Yeah. Well, they don't teach you in school, like, like the things, like they don't want to talk about it. So they don't teach you about it. But then it does happen. So, but no one knows what to do. And it's just not, you have to know what to do. It's like, unless you have experienced it before, or like you have a close friend who's experienced it and you help them, you just don't, it's not common knowledge.
It isn't common knowledge, and people, it makes them uncomfortable, so people don't ever really want to talk about it. But I think it's something that needs to be talked about, so that way survivors are able to find the support that they need, and then their support system is able to provide that.
Yeah, 100%. And this is going like off our questions a little bit, but I wanted to say that I'm really glad that you have good church support because I feel like that can kind of either go either way sometimes, but I'm really glad that your church has been like a good support system because faith can be like so important in the healing process and so beneficial.
Yeah.
Or you could feel ostracized. So
yeah, and church has been one of the things that I have kind of talked about in therapy a lot because, like I grew up being a Christian. And so like after this happened, like I still had my faith, but it almost kind of knocks it a little bit, it rattles you. And so, sometimes when I would go into the church, like I would almost feel like this heaviness, and I was like, what does that mean? Am I supposed to be laying something down, or does that mean that I'm about to become overwhelmed and have a complete breakdown in the middle of service? But I think a lot of times, like me feeling that heaviness was for me to have that emotional release because I kept it in. And oftentimes the pastor would say my word, which after I was assaulted, my word was surrender. And so I remember back in like December, the pastor said that like 3 or 4 times throughout the service. And I remember just losing it in the middle. And I was like, wow, I'm sure I look like a complete idiot. But it was something that I really needed, and I had a lot of really good support from church in that aspect. They kind of give you the love that you need, and a lot of times those messages are directed specifically for you. And so you can only avoid it so long before God starts making stuff happen anyway.
So, Courtney, what do you want people to know about sexual assault awareness?
Well, one, that it's not commonly talked about at all, and it can happen to anyone, any race, any age. You know, it could happen to a child or adolescent, young adult. You know, someone like elderly. It can happen anywhere. I know there's like I remember y'all talked about this a little bit, like, oh, well, if you wear this, like, it's more likely to happen. Or if you stay out after 2 a.m. and you're by yourself in a dark alley, or if you've been drinking or something like that. But that doesn't give anyone the right to do that. Like, they made that choice, not you. And so I think that people definitely need to be educated on what that looks like.
Yes.
I think it's important to remember too, you know, it's not about the person, it's not about the survivor, it's about the perpetrator. It's not anything that you have done.
No, like, they make that choice and they feel that they have that specific power over you, for sure.
Yeah. Short skirts, alcohol, nothing causes rape. The only thing that causes rape is rapists. I don't know if y'all have seen like that like pie chart before. It's like my favorite. It's like what causes rape, and it's just rapists. That's the only thing that causes rape. So that's definitely something that we try to put out there. I mean, we're just in a rape culture society. Like, I feel like, I don't know, some of the things, even some of like the comments I'll see on videos of like survivors like sharing their stories, and I'll be like, how can you be so ignorant? It's just, yeah. So that's we try to talk about these things, like you said, because you have to talk about it. Like, if we don't talk about it, it's just going to get worse and be how it is.
Yeah, and then people are going to be like, oh, well, I was never educated.
Right.
Well, and that's the thing that with prevention education, right? You're not, obviously, you know, you want to teach people how to protect themselves and personal safety, but you don't want to put the education on, you should do this so that you don't get raped. The education should be on, you should not rape.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. You should learn how to use consent and know that no means no, and that the only thing means yes is yes. Yeah. We like consent here. We talk about consent a lot. We'll use like an opportunity to talk about consent because we love consent.
But it's true. Like, if someone doesn't verbally say no, that doesn't mean that they said yes. Like, it's body language. It's like it can be verbal or nonverbal cues. Like, literally yes, and that's it. Like, and it should be yes from both parties, not just one.
And that yes is a nonverbal cue. The only yes is like an unhindered, unprompted, unmanipulated, like, yes.
Ongoing, enthusiastic. Yep. Yeah. But yeah. So we kind of touched on this a little bit. What would you think is important for anyone to know about like personal safety?
So personal safety is important, but yeah, we do need to be like aware of our surroundings, and like protecting ourselves and things like that. But those are just like physical things. There's personal safety, like mentally and emotionally too. So like setting boundaries and like saying no and self-care and self-advocacy.
Yeah, I really like that. I've never, I guess, thought of like personal safety as like also being like an emotional and a physical, or not just physical, like being an emotional and mental thing too.
Yeah, because if you're comfortable putting forth those emotional and those mental boundaries, even in like everyday life with things that aren't about sex or that aren't about like sexual consent, the more comfortable you are saying no and putting boundaries and protecting yourself first, the more comfortable you're going to be in a situation like that to be like, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
So, do you think that there are adequate resources available for survivors?
I mean, I don't think so. I think, like, I know y'all do a really good job at like advertising, and I've seen that. And I know like a lot of like national things, like the Sam Foundation and like RAIN, like they do a really good job at advocating for things. But like, I'm in North Alabama, and I rarely see anything from somewhere in Madison County.
Yeah.
I know there are some, but they are not well advertised at all. And so I know a lot of people like in my own community that are hurting, and it's because they don't know that there are resources that exist. So I feel like people need to really reach out into their own community and advertise what they're there for and what they're meant to do.
I agree. So our organization, I think, we're still debating. We still can't figure out if it's 40 or 50 years this year that we've been around. And I mean, almost every single community event, we have someone come up and go, I had no clue that you existed. I wish I had known. I would have called. This happened to me 27 years. Like, I so wish that there was just a way that everyone could know. You know what I'm saying? Like, part of that is that prevention education, letting us go in and talk to people at a younger age so then they do know, they grow up, like just going out and being in the community. If it was more acceptable to talk about, then we could talk about how to get help. And like,
and making themselves available. Because like I reached out to like one person whom I didn't really know all that well. And I didn't really tell her exactly what was going on other than the fact of I knew that she was kind of in that field. And so I was like, is there people here like in, the Huntsville-Madison County area that I can call? And she gave me this like hotline number, and I remember calling it. And I ended up having to wait on hold for like 20 minutes. I ended up leaving a voicemail, and then never got called back. And that happens, unfortunately, more often than it should.
Yeah. I hate to hear that, first of all. For anyone listening, just kind of to go off of that, if you are in anywhere in the United States and you are unsure of what resources are available to you, if you go on the RAIN, RAINN.org website, you can find the crisis center that is closest to you, and you can find that number. So just anyone who may be looking, like, thankfully you had a friend who was able to like give you to that number. Apparently that number did not do their job, so I hope these will. But yeah, that resource we love to use because it can kind of help anyone anywhere, and it has that. But again, no one just knows that like there's a website that has all the sexual assault crisis. Like no one just knows.
Yeah.
That. So yeah, I hate. That makes me so mad. Like I would hope that the only reason they weren't able to answer was because they were on the line with another survivor. I would hope, but there's no reason that they shouldn't.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like you try to give these places like the benefit of the doubt because you know that they're probably overwhelmed with callers. But it's also like at the same time, like as a survivor, like not being able to talk to anyone or just not getting a call back, like it makes you feel like ignored and like not validated. And so then when you really feel like you have to reach out, you're hesitant to because you know that you didn't get anything the first time.
So did you ever try to reach out like again to this same organization?
So I remember I called twice, but that was like in the same day. It was literally like maybe an hour apart. But I never did hear anything back. And so I remember that pretty soon after that is when I reached out to my pastor, and she gave me the number of someone who she trusted. And so then I reached out to her and therapy was born. So
Good.
Yeah, pretty
I'm
cool
glad,
how God orchestrates things.
yeah, I'm glad your pastor had like just like a resource like that. Like that's so important and really
Oh, yeah.
necessary. Yeah.
Yeah, and that definitely goes back to the first thing that we were saying was that like the first person that you talk to, it's so important that they give you positive support and that they are there for you and say that I believe you. I hate that hotline didn't do their job, but I'm really glad that you did have someone who was there to listen.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk more about, I guess, the recovery process. I believe you talked a little bit about this, but did you have any PTSD triggers? Do you still experience PTSD triggers? Sorry.
Yeah, I got you. I know what you meant. So yes to both. I did have them and I still do have them. They, even with therapy, like they don't go away overnight. They get better, but there are times where like at the very beginning, I would have the flashbacks and the nightmares and the night sweats, and I would have these like random crying spells. Like I could be walking down the ice cream aisle and just start crying, and I was like, "What is happening to me? Like, why am I doing this? I'm literally getting ice cream, which is supposed to be good." But then even now, like a year out, like I could be driving in the car and just randomly think about it, and then I could start shaking and crying, and things come back up. And that was, one of the diagnoses that I had was PTSD, because I experienced these things for, a certain amount of time.
So going along, have you found anything that helps? Like, do you have any like symptom management hacks that work for you?
So one of the ones that worked best for me was actually journaling. And when I first started, I mean, it might have been like 2 sentences. Like, I had a bad day and I cried for like 30 minutes. And that was about all I wrote. And honestly, at first, I was like, this is boring and not helpful at all. But the more that I did it and like actually kept track of how often it was happening, I was able to get a lot better at it and actually like hone in on exactly what I was feeling whenever I came back to like a naturalistic state, and process whatever trigger it was that happened. And I would write it down, and then I was like, wow, like that actually felt better, to kind of get that out there. Something else that was helpful was like if I just took a minute and like I went outside or I went on a walk, or tried to play a game, or like a relaxing bath, or like whatever it was, to come up with some sort of distraction to get my mind off of it, just enough to allow some type of positivity to come in.
I hope. I know this is also like a one size does not fit all thing. So I'm glad that you were able to find things that like worked and did work for you. I also hate journaling, but it's so helpful. Like you hate it,
It is.
but it works.
It really does. And I think it's hard too, because like whenever you write it down, it's different than like verbally speaking it. Because like for me, like if I write it down on a piece of paper, or I like type it out and then I try to like read it out loud, I'm like, I can't do that. And like I start to panic, because you're like, oh wow, like now I actually have to be like vulnerable. Wow, I can't talk. Vulnerable with a human and not just like by yourself. Because the more that I would write it, and like keep it like to myself, I would go back and read them and then pick those things back up. So what I started doing is like, our therapy office, along with a lot of other ones, they have like a patient portal. that you can go in and like do your own journal there. And then you can keep it private, or you can share it like with your therapist, and it kind of sends them a message letting them know like what you've done. And so I started doing that and automatically sharing it with her. So that way it was almost like I was communicating with someone else, and then we could talk about it later without me like verbally having to read it, but it was still getting discussed. And I felt like I wasn't keeping it to myself as much, which was really helpful. And I think a big part for me too is remembering that we can't help other people if we're not like our best self. So self-care is like really important. And like we said earlier, like they don't all work for one person. You know, you could have 10 options and only one actually works for you. Or, you know, you could have 3 or 4 that you can rotate between. So mine, I have a resource list that I use. And it's got several parts to it. So like the first part is you just kind of jot down things that you notice about yourself whenever you kind of start to feel like rattled or anxious. So it could be like your heart starts to race, or you're sweating, or you know that your mood is getting bad, or you know, you haven't been sleeping the past couple days. Like whatever that is what that you put on that first line. And then the second part is like a coping strategy that, hold on, sorry. Okay, so yeah, so coping strategies that you can use that I can like redirect my thoughts without having to contact another person. So that could be like a bath, or going on a hike because I love to be outside, or just going upstairs to our bonus space and like watching my favorite TV show, or eating my favorite food, or whatever that may be. But it's mainly like alone time, things that you yourself can do to try and bring yourself back. And then part 3 is where if the second part doesn't work, you list people that you can reach out to that are like not like in your house. So like I wouldn't put, you know, my parents or my sister or anyone like that. It would be someone else. So like I could put like a aunt, or my pastor, or my best friend, or, you know, my fiance, or, you know, whoever that may be. And then you've got the part right underneath it, which is where you write down whatever you feel that things that you start to notice when you have returned back to a peaceful state. So, oh, like I got 7 hours last night compared to the past 3 nights where I've only gotten like an hour and a half. Or I have less bags under my eyes, or my skin has started to clear up, or like, you know, your mood is better, or you don't feel as mentally, physically, emotionally, even spiritually drained as you do. And I think the last part is you write down things, like you research different places and like hotlines that you are able to contact. So like we have crisis centers here, you know, in Madison County that I could call. RAIN is on there. Like the Sam Foundation, like they do a lot of videos and outreaches too. So like, you know, they're listed. And then like my own therapist is listed. So like if I became way too overwhelmed, I could, you know, just send her like a secure text and be like, hey, you know, I really need this, and I have tried my resource list, but I'm still struggling. So like, can you help? That I think has been like the most helpful, has been the resource list, and like breathing techniques and like relaxation to try and release all of that tension that you feel from literally like your head all the way down to your toes. So like uncrossing your arms, uncrossing your legs, closing your eyes, and like really just trying to be you, and trying to let all of those other things go.
It sounds a lot like, so I know one of the most popular forms of treatment for sexual assault survivors is either CBT or DBT, cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy. And both of those focus a lot on mindfulness. So like you were saying, focusing on how you're feeling when you're having a triggering event, and then self-soothing techniques. So that's really awesome that works for you.
Oh yeah. And it wasn't easy either, like starting off with it, but it's better.
Did you like come up with like the outline yourself?
No, my therapist actually has one that she frequents in her practice. And so she emailed it to me for me to start, and then I just brought it in with me one day, and after session she kind of helped me like fill it out. And then if I felt like one thing wasn't working or I wanted to add something else, then, we were able to do that. And the resource list literally does not have to be just for, a trauma or crisis survivor. Like it could literally be like for you, like at work, oh, I am like overwhelmed with all of these podcasts that I have to put in, or I have 200 emails that I swear I answered 30 minutes ago and now they're back in my inbox. And you could say, I need to just take like a 10-minute break and go walk around. So it's literally for anyone.
I love that. I like the layout of that. It kind of, I don't know if you've gotten to like this part. Have you ever had to like use or make like a safety plan for someone who is suicidal?
I haven't had to make a safety plan yet, but we have had to make treatment plans. And so I have had to make one for someone that like experienced trauma. And those treatment plans like are really hard to make. But in the intervention portion of that, like I did include the resource type list.
Okay. Yeah, that reminds me a lot of like almost like a safety plan, but like a mental health well-being plan. Like you do it when you're in a good state for when you're not, and you already have it there, so you don't have to think on the spot.
Yeah.
I think anyone could benefit from that, honestly.
Well, and when she first told me about the resource list, that's honestly what I thought. Is I was like, don't like suicidal people have those, that they have to use. And they do have certain resource lists and safety plans like incorporated into that. But it doesn't have to be, again, just for those. It can be modified to fit whatever needs that you have.
So this is kind of like another topic, but reestablishing or like starting new relationships after an assault. Do you find yourself having difficulty being able to handle engaging in intimacy without being triggered, or have you kind of figured out a way to work through that?
So I haven't experienced the intimacy portion of it yet, but I'm sure I will. But one thing that I did want to say on that is that communication is a really big part of relationships, and it's really hard. And I struggle with that because avoiding all emotions like the plague. And like you don't know what the other person's reaction is going to be. And so sometimes you just kind of go with the flow and kind of just accept whatever they have to say, because you think that it benefits them, and then you can just suffer later. But communication is really key, and it's not always easy, but it is important. And what I can tell people is intimacy does come with time, and both partners should be ready for it, and they should both have agreed upon it. Like you said, verbally, they should say yes. And you can only do it when you are ready. Like the other person and no one else can make that decision for you. You have to do that. So you can only do what you're comfortable with. And I mean, that's about it. Like I know for me that probably will be one of the biggest struggles. But I know that there are programs that people can use. Like one of them is called Prepare and Enrich program, and so it does talk about like communication and conflict, and of course like finances, spirituality, relationships and roles. But it also does have like a intimacy section to it with different exercises that you can use and incorporate the conflict and communication portion into it, so you can try to work through those things with your partner. And I think that that's really helpful. I haven't gotten to that section yet, but my fiance and we are doing that program just to make sure that we're all on the same page.
That's great. So, when survivors, like you said, sometimes it's difficult for family or friends to kind of know what to do after an assault or how to act, or any ways to help you. So what would you say are some practical ways that family and friends have helped you, or you think would be beneficial, or you would give advice to them to try with other survivors?
So for like families and friends, I think some of the best ways is like to be patient, be compassionate, try to be like empathetic, maintain that trust between the two of you, and honestly just to be there. And I'll kind of expand on that a little bit. So I know being patient is hard because we want everything right now. That's just kind of our society, like as a survivor, like I didn't really go into therapy thinking that, oh, like after one session, like I'm going to be fixed. But you also don't know how hard and how long it's going to be, because there's not really a timeline for it, because again, everyone's different and the healing process is hard. So for families, like to be patient with their progress. Don't try not to say, well, you're in therapy, so you would think that you would be better. But that's not it at all. So just be patient with them. And survivors, like a lot of us, like we don't want a pity party. We don't want people to say, oh, I am so, so, so sorry for you. Like, I don't want that. I literally just want people to like respect me, and I want them to see me and love me, and I want them to like listen to what I am trying to say, because there's a difference between hearing and listening. So like, like I'm talking and y'all can hear the words that I'm saying, but listening is totally different, because whatever I'm saying, like y'all sometimes will reiterate that. And that lets me know that you truly understand what I'm saying and you're trying to like see it like from my perspective. And that's honestly a lot of like what survivors want. I think that shows that people are there for us and that they support us. And like, and maintaining trust, because I know trusting is hard. And I was trusting like before this happened, and you could probably say that I was a little over trusting, because I've always wanted to give people the benefit of the doubt on things. And that would cause me to be very over forgiving and over apologetic. But like after this, like, I still may be overly forgiving and overly apologetic, but I don't really trust as easy. That's a lot harder. So when you're able to show that compassion and those like active listening skills, and they don't go run off and tell somebody else and like betray you, that trust remains there. And that's something, for me, because like I've been betrayed with it, and it's not fun. And so then you don't want to tell anyone else, even if it's someone that you're really close to, because you feel that, it's either going to be manipulated or they're going to go tell someone and they're not going to believe you and this rumor is going to be started, or, just a number of things. So maintaining that trust is important. And the last thing would be is that it's not always about being like present for someone, because I could be sitting and talking to someone all day long, then they're like, oh, okay, bye, nice talking to you, and then they leave. But it's about like being that someone or that something for someone else. So like if someone needs that validation or the words of affirmation, or they just need to be supported or hugged, or you need someone to be your rock for a little while, like be that for them.
Good. I like that. Those are all great things to get from family and friends. And again, sadly, we see so many people who their family or their friends react so poorly. So I do hope, like with stuff like this, like just getting like the simplest things out there, just like these small steps you can take that will make a survivor feel like heard and supported and like they can talk to you. So did you ever feel that after you recovered that you might be a different person? And did it scare you to think of who that person like might be, like how you might change?
All the time. So I would say in the past like couple months, that particular question has came up a lot for me, because like after it happens, and you start experiencing whatever signs and symptoms it might be, you're like, is this going to be my new normal? Is this the new me? Like, there's so many qualities that I used to like about myself, and now I feel that they're gone, and I don't know how to get them back. But then, like you kind of have to figure out how like to become a new person. But that's also scary, because now that you've been this already new person after it's happened, you're like, what is that going to look like? Am I going to be even better, or am I going to be way worse than I am right now? And I had that a lot, like even after I heal, what is life going to look like for me? And I wasn't sure that I would be able to get really any of it back.
We, a lot in the like sexual assault advocacy and stuff, the symbol of like a butterfly is kind of like supposed to be like symbolic of a survivor, becoming like thriving, becoming a butterfly. We had an intern. She's actually an MFT and was getting her IELTS or LMSW, and she says it way better than me. But I love how she talks about it. She's like, sometimes you just kind of sit in your goop for a while. You just kind of have to sit in your gross like goop before you become that butterfly. And so she says that sometimes her butterfly like hits walls and stuff now. But if it's a bad day, she'll just be like, it's a goopy day today. And I always like that, because I'm like, yeah, it's a goopy day. Sometimes you just have goopy days.
You do. And everyone has those goopy days.
Mm-hmm. I think an important thing to remember too is that we don't want to stay the same, right? Like through our entire lives, it's all about growing and changing and becoming something better. So it's not that, this negative thing has happened to you and it's setting you back into like this negative place now. It's about remembering you don't really want to go back to where you were even before the assault anyway, because you always want to be growing, changing, and improving.
Yeah, with that too. So did you ever feel like afterward that you were a burden to others if you were to tell them what happened, or like you were to look for comfort and let them know how you were feeling?
Every single day of my life. And that is something that I still like struggle with today, after the, trauma occurred, like I didn't really tell a whole lot of people. I kind of kept everything bottled up inside, and I started building like a ton of these walls up because I wanted to try and handle it on my own. And we all kind of see how that works out. But, and I wanted to try and carry all of that weight by myself because I didn't want to bother anyone else on my struggles. I knew that everyone else had their own stuff to deal with. And, like and it sounds crazy, but like if I was carrying something that was like 500 pounds and someone was like, here, like, I'll take some of that, you would think that, you would be so excited because you're like, wow, like this 250 is a heck of a lot easier than carrying the 500. But that's a lot easier said than done, because when they take that off of me and I was left with that 250, I was like, well, what if they had that 500 and they just took 250 and made it 750? What if I just added on to their stress? And that's not like at all like how it should be, but that's oftentimes like how it is for people. Like they want, it's not that we don't want other people to help us, because we do. We just know that everyone has this great thing called life, and so if they're struggling too, you don't want to have to add stuff onto their plate.
I think as women, a lot of the time we're fixers, right? Like, you watch moms take care of the family and like they put everybody in front of themselves and you're like, oh, that's a really admirable thing. That's what I should do. But really, the only way that you're going to be able to take care of other people is if you take care of yourself first. And I think in recovery, especially for survivors, it's important to remember that like your needs are important and they should come first to you, because who's going to put your needs before their own?
Yeah.
Ideally, people would, but your first priority should be yourself, especially in recovery.
So what would you say is the hardest thing throughout your recovery journey that you have experienced that you've had to endure?
Probably becoming vulnerable. And people ask me all the time, well, isn't that just like being open with someone? It's not. That's actually totally different, two separate things. You can be open with someone, but in that, the communication that you are giving is something that you are choosing, per se, to say to them. You could say, well, I've just had a really bad day. That's being open. But like being vulnerable is allowing whatever walls that you have built up to try to start to come down, and you're sharing specific experiences 1v1, and you're expanding on that. So like I have had a really bad day because of me being triggered a lot today. I've had some panic attacks and I just feel really sad and like hopeless right now. And I just really need some help. So would you be able to do that for me? Like, being vulnerable is allowing someone else to be a part of your story and doing that journey with you. And I think that's been the hardest thing for me, because I wanted the help, but it was also terrifying to see what all I had put behind those walls if I started to let them come down, because I knew that that means that I would have to confront those emotions, and it's hard.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's like opening up and telling somebody what that 250 pounds means to you as they take it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Giving, you answered that very well. Just like giving them, being vulnerable is like, giving them the chance to kind of hurt you again if they don't react the way that you would like for them to, or you would like for them not to. So it's allowing them to either say, hey, I'm going to take this, I'm going to help you, or potentially getting hurt again. So definitely, I'm sure difficult, especially as a survivor, because you already have had kind of like this ultimate betrayal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we are actually to our last question. This is kind of something we always want to end our podcast on, just as like kind of like a message of hope to survivors. But before we get to that, Courtney, do you have anything specific you like want to add or want to say?
I do, and it's long, but I did type it out. And the reason for that is because I felt the Holy Spirit laying a whole bunch of stuff down, that he was like, there are going to be people that are going to see and hear this. And I just didn't want to miss any of that, because I want to reach as many people as I can with this story. But essentially, I want to say that, and I'm probably going to read this straight from here so I don't miss anything important. But life is inevitable. There are going to be things that happen. There's going to be hiccups and things that we have to go through. And sometimes pain is going to come along with that. That's inevitable. But the having to suffer through it is totally optional. We don't have to deal with that forever. There are ways and people that can help us through that. And trauma is stored like all in the body, and it doesn't just affect your mental and emotional health. It affects the physical part too. And I know that one of the questions that people ask me all the time is, like, how am I supposed to begin to heal, and what are some of the proper coping skills that I'm going to need in order to manage this? And those are like, they seem like they would be easy questions to answer, but they're not. They're hard. And although we can't change like what we've been through in the past or what we're going through now, we have the opportunity to dig deep into ourselves and find out ways to make ourselves better and new, improved. And then we can share our stories to, help someone else, because healing and recovery is not easy, but it is possible to do. And I know some people all the time tell me, oh, well, I wish that this never happened, and I wish that I was different, or that the event was totally different. And those events like are unfortunate. Like what happened to me and to like other people, like it is unfortunate, but we can't really go back and change that. You can't change the past, but we are able to go forward, and you can decide how your future looks for you. And that we are able to develop a new perspective and become more optimistic and grow stronger because of what happened. And that you were someone else before it happened. But again, you have the opportunity to be someone totally different and take all of those qualities that you loved and turn around and make something even better. And I don't know if anyone has ever heard of the term kintsugi before, but it's awesome. It's actually a Japanese art. And like if like a vase was dropped on the ground and it shattered. Like a potter would take those pieces and instead of trying to just super glue it and make it the exact same, he would fill the cracks with gold and then it would become this like marvelous masterpiece. But that can be applied to like our own life journey too, because when things happen, like we feel totally beat down and broken, but we can find new things to put in place of that, and we can also become something magnificent, and use it for the greater good. And that trauma, doesn't discriminate. It can literally happen to anyone, and we are left feeling broken and upset and totally disgusted with ourselves. We feel betrayed by someone that we know and had trusted. We're disappointed in what happened, but we're also disappointed in ourselves for, not allowing ourselves to feel those emotions, or disappointed in the fact that we're still having to deal with things and why aren't we healing fast enough. Like I get all of that, and it sucks because I lived it and I'm currently living it. You build up all these walls and it's really hard to tear them down, and I still do avoid my emotions sometimes, but I'm human and that just happens. Like I can't just be reprogrammed in 30 minutes and be over it. It takes time and it takes a lot of practice. There are days where you are going to have really good days, and then days that you're going to have really bad days where the emotions just totally overwhelm you. But it's okay to not be okay. Like you have every right to feel those emotions and tell yourself that, they are real and they're valid and you have a reason for feeling them. So it's okay to acknowledge that fact. You don't have to hide it all the time. And something about emotions that I wanted to say was that the feelings that they have, like even though those emotions were so negative, and really those thoughts can be your own because you're like, oh, like I feel this or I feel blank. Like generally other people are not telling you that, like you're telling yourself that. And that was really hard for me at first because I was like, well, isn't the devil telling me all that stuff? Well, that's how it can start, but then you pick it up and you continue that trend because that's what trauma does. And those emotions almost like embrace you, because you felt like people weren't there for you, like at the very beginning. And so, you try to handle it by yourself and you didn't really feel validated, but those emotions, even though they were negative, they gave you that validation. Like they became a part of you. They took you under their wing. And they told you that you weren't enough. And, and we decide to listen to those and take hold of them because we felt acknowledged, even though it wasn't good for us. Because trauma, like the part of the body that it affects is obviously all of it, but the limbic system in particular. And the limbic system is literally controlled entirely by emotion. And sometimes when things happen, like we feel that logic has been taken completely out of the equation, and it's really hard for us to process those things. But whatever, you're feeling, just know that it is normal to feel those things. Everyone feels anger at some point. Or they may feel sad or happy or joy or something like that. Even though everyone feels those, like they all have a different reason for them. So don't feel like your reason is any less than anyone else's. Just know that you are resilient. You have literally survived every single day up until this point, and it has been hard, and it's been a really hard journey. But like, look how resilient, how much you've persevered in order to get to this point. And for other people, like the mental health stigma about like not wanting like other people to get help literally kills me. When you're sick, you literally go to the doctor. Or when you are struggling in school, where do you go? You go to a tutor. All of those people help break down the problem and give you a solution to help get you back on your feet and to make you better. It should be no different for, your mental and emotional health at all. So it is okay, like if you need a therapist, counselor, like if you need someone to help you, like it is totally okay to reach out. There have been so many times where I'm either like in church or just like out in public, or I am even in my own therapist office, and I feel overwhelmed, and then I start to cry, and then it's almost like I always want to fully wipe them away or cover them up and pretend like they're not there because you don't want to be seen as weak or like not strong enough to handle this, or, just anything like that. And I saw them, like, for me, I was like, does that mean that I am not strong enough? And so I would tell myself that all the time, but that wasn't it. And I came across a post once, and it was talking about how to view your own tears and how not to view them like as like a burden or something that is a sign of weakness, because it's not. That you should actually see those tears as a blessing, because when you are crying like that, you're generally not able to verbally really get anything out. And so think of those tears as like words when you're not able to speak, or like as a prayer to God, because He sees your tears too. Um, and I think that was like, and I still do struggle with that. So it's a lot. All of this is a lot easier said than it is done. But in another thing, like, you are not what society says about you, and you don't have a timeline for how fast that you have to recover, because everyone is different. So please do not beat yourself up for not feeling like, that you're not healing fast enough, or you're not adapting fast enough, or you're not good enough, because you are. Recovery and healing is not overnight. And another thing, just because you see a therapist does not mean that you're going to be fixed very quickly. The therapist is able to go through and hear you and see you and listen to you and give you different things to help you grow and like manage things, which eventually, you could be able to do on your own. That's what they're there for. But they themselves can't fix you. Like, they can give you all of these things all day long, but until you start believing them yourself and taking action on it, then you're still going to kind of be like in the same spot. Like, only you and God can heal you. And it's your process and your story. My phrase was always like, I'm fine. And obviously I wasn't. And I have been told 100 plus times that it is fine to not be fine, because all of this healing is your story, and eventually you will be fine with it. And eventually, like, you'll be able to see that one day and look back at all of this. And for some of it, I will probably laugh about it and be like, wow, why did I wait so long to do these things? But I do want to say that, like, a lot of times, like, I didn't feel seen, I didn't feel heard or loved or really any of those things. So that's something that I get to say to everyone else, is that, you do matter and that you're wanted and you're needed to make this world better. You, you're validated, like, we see the things that you go through, and you are not alone in this. You are a world and life changer. You can make a difference, and you do have a voice. You may have felt that that after this happened, like, that they took something from you, but you actually have the power, because you get to take that back and show them that you can heal from it, and they are the ones that have to deal with it, not you. And so, like, you're totally amazing, and you've got this, and y'all are all valued and super important. And loved, and I hope that you take this message and you get something out of it, if you are a survivor, even a family member, and to please reach out, like, if anyone ever needs anything, because you do have people that truly want to help you, and that they do care about you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast, Courtney. I think that this will have such a positive effect on so many people. Like, there are so many people out there who needed to hear like something like this, and to not feel like they're alone. Thank you so much for being brave enough to share your story, because I know it's not easy. I'm sure it's very difficult, and we so appreciate you coming on and being willing to be vulnerable and open, and to use your story to help others, which we love. Aileen, do you have anything before we sign off?
I respect you. I honor you. I hear you. And I am here for you. Thank you for sharing. I really liked what you said about tears aren't a weakness. I've heard before, crying is like taking a lid off of a boiling pot. It's letting out that emotion in a way that words can't. That's really beautiful, the way that you put it.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Of course, we so enjoyed it. We thank you so much for coming on. Thank you guys all who are listening, and we will see you on next week's episode. Bye.